water, earth, fire, air. Long ago, the four nations lived together in harmony. Then, everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. Only the Avatar, master of all four elements, could stop them. But when the world needed him most, he vanished. 100 years passed and my brother and I discovered the new Avatar, an airbender named Aang. And although his airbending skills are great, he has a lot to learn before he's ready to save anyone. But I believe Aang can save the world.
Well, with Season 1 of Avatar having come to a close, it's time to put down Fellowship of the Ring. And we're moving on to Two Towers now. Although in our case, it is Book 2, Earth. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Avatar Vlogs. This is Book 2, Earth, Chapter 1, The Avatar State. And even though I liked Book 1 of Season 1 technically of this show, I will admit I've always kind of thought that it got off to a bit of a, not a rough start, but a start that didn't necessarily grab you immediately. It was a very slow burn in that regard, but with that said, it did burn its way through. Those embers did eventually catch fire, and it turned out a pretty good season. But now we're on to Season 2, and already we're off to a really damn good start. So, Team Avatar has left the North Pole, and they're heading down to Omashu, because in Omashu there's King Bumi, and Bumi is the most powerful earthbender that we know of so far. And so it only figures that Aang should learn earthbending from him. But while they're stopping over, they're stopping at an Earth Kingdom military base where General Fong is going to escort them there further. But while they're there, General Fong decides he wants to find a way to try and entice the Avatar state out of Aang, because given how Aang turned into Fish Godzilla in the last episode, he figures they can utilize the Avatar state to launch an attack on the Fire Nation right now and put an end to the war as soon as possible. Aang has reservations about this because the Avatar state up till this point is completely unpredictable and uncontrollable, more or less. But after witnessing the destruction that the Fire Nation is continuing to cause, he's persuaded enough to at least try something. And that's part 1 of this story. And part 2 is just as interesting and a good way to show how this season is going to go. Zuko and Iroh have left the North Pole, and they've arrived in the Earth Kingdom themselves and are not on the run, but they're refugees at this point. But meanwhile, Zuko's younger sister, Princess Azula, has now been ordered by Ozai to bring them in, but she tries to convince them that Fire Lord Ozai wants them back in the Fire Nation as an act of good faith. But given how the last episode ended, I'm fairly certain that's very much not going to be the case. Okay, so you have Aang trying to learn how to master the Avatar state, and you have Zuko more or less finally severing his ties with the Fire Nation after it turns out that everyone he knew and loved and trusted, except for his uncle, are completely out to get him. So, yeah, this was a pretty good start to the season. Not only does it deal with already 2 very good conflicting storylines, but it kind of, I don't know how intentional this was, but it kind of finally addressed, I think, what was a bit of a criticism some people might have had about Season 1 of the show. So for those of you who don't know, and I should probably get some pictures of these characters so you know who they are, but Aang, being the Avatar, he's able to go into this state of being known as the Avatar state, where his eyes and his airbender tattoos will glow blue. He'll become more or less not fully aware of his actions, but he'll become insanely powerful, which of course makes it good in a fight, but at the same time it's very dangerous because as of now, Aang can't control this. And it's not revealed until later in the episode, but what the Avatar state is, since the Avatars are a long line of people that have been reincarnated over the years, the Avatar state is a defense mechanism that activates when you're at your most dangerous, when you're in danger rather, and it allows you the collective power and knowledge of all the past lives that came before you. So it's basically a last-ditch effort to save yourself or whatever the situation might be. But there is a catch with this system. It turns out if, for whatever reason, you are killed while in the avatar state, the reincarnation cycle will be broken and the avatar will cease to exist from that point on. Now, this show admittedly does deal with darker topics and more grim issues, but we're already dealing with the fact that Aang is in fact the last airbender, so when you present the possibility he could very well be the last avatar, that's kind of a grim implication. Like, already that's I can't really do it justice, because Avatar Roku explains this to Aang, and Jason Barrett's voice does it so much better. It's a real chilling scene, actually. If you are killed in the avatar state, the reincarnation cycle will be broken and the avatar will cease to exist. It's a great scene, and this whole episode, focusing on Aang, again, is a little comedic. Like, there are a lot of points where they try giving Aang tea, which is basically giving him Red Bull and cocaine at the exact same time to try and incite it. They try scaring him like you would do if you're trying to cure the hiccups. They try a weird ceremony where you can tell the guy performing it doesn't really believe in the mumbo jumbo he's saying, before finally General Fong decides to outright attack Aang and even hold Katara hostage and threaten her life in order to threaten Aang and entice him to go into the avatar state, which works. And and I think the whole point of this episode and this plot was kind of a criticism, addressing maybe a criticism. I could be wrong, but I think it might have been addressing a criticism of why Aang doesn't go into the avatar state more often, because as we've seen in past episodes, and especially the last episode, he's more than capable of annihilating fleets, just practically bringing nations to their knees should he need to. But this episode was kind of showing that it's not like that. It's not like Super Saiyan in Dragon Ball, where you get a power-up and you use it just to win the day. This is something that is dangerous, not only to its user, but to those around him. And they do this by kind of giving it a much deeper meaning to it. Even the creators of the show actually kind of changed this as they went on. In the original pilot for the show, Aang is aware of how he can manipulate the avatar state and even throws himself off a cliff to activate it before he just falls out of it again. But that is not nearly as interesting. And if Aang just kept going into the avatar state over and over again, the episodes would get very repetitive and formulaic. So I think it was a really smart choice that they didn't do that, and they instead focused on trying to keep it a little mysterious, kind of deadly, and most of all, it is in fact dangerous to the user. And you get a lot of good scenes between Aang and Katara discussing why Aang feels he needs to do this because he wants to stop the war and stop people from dying. But Katara is saying, I understand what you're saying, but it is very scary to those who love you to see you in such a state of uncontrollable rage and pain. So you get some really good conversations between both sides of this. I guess while we're here, I should mention General Fong is kind of a villain in this episode, in the sense that he's trying to push Aang and a kid into something that they're not only comfortable, but they're not really prepared to do. And even though this is basically his only appearance, it is a memorable one. He's played by Daniel Day Kim, who you've probably seen in a lot of other movies. He usually plays, villains. But I could be wrong. I think this episode with Daniel Day Kim is actually the only crossover element between an actor that was in this version of The Last Airbender and the live-action Netflix Last Airbender, where he played Fire Lord Ozai. So I thought that was kind of a neat little way to tie everything together. And of course, the second plot with Iroh and Zuko is really good. And this episode is also very notable because it is the introduction of Azula. And I just got to say this right now. I freaking love Azula. Like, she is, without a doubt, in my opinion, one of the top 3 best villain characters of all time. She is easily the best villain in this show. And it comes from a lot of reasons. Now, first of all, she is a 14-year-old child. Now, I will admit the animation doesn't really support the fact that she's basically a young teenager. But you're not really supposed to think about it. But she is a teenage girl. But not only that, she is shown to be exceptionally powerful and dangerous, because not only does she have the attitude that she will not hesitate to, you know, she will not let anything stand in her way. If you threaten the mission that she's on, she will not hesitate to bring you down. In fact, her first scene is a great example of that, which, take a look.
If you hesitate, I will not hesitate to bring you down. Dismissed.
Princess, I'm afraid the tides will not allow us to bring the ship into port before nightfall.
I'm sorry, Captain, but I do not know much about the tides. Can you explain something to me?
Of course, Your Highness.
Do the tides command this ship?
I'm afraid I don't understand.
You said the tides would not allow us to bring the ship in. Do the tides command this ship?
No, Princess.
And if I were to have you thrown overboard, would the tides think twice about smashing you against the rocky shore?
No, Princess.
Well then, maybe you should worry less about the tides, who've already made up their mind about killing you, and worry more about me, who's still mulling it over.
I'll pull us in.
Yeah, wasn't that awesome? So she's cunning, she's manipulative. I will admit, in some of her earlier scenes, she's kind of a bad liar, like when she's trying to convince Zuko as to why he should come home and that her father has accepted him back in. She's really not doing a good job of convincing him, and part of a character trait that she does exhibit later in the show is she lies, but she's sometimes just so confident in the lie that even though she knows she's making it up, she's just so confident that you'll believe her that she almost doesn't even try to lie harder. I know that doesn't make a lot of sense, but it almost kind of makes up for the fact that she's blatantly lying to the point where Iroh does not trust her. In fact, it's kind of funny how Iroh is such a forgiving, wise, and trusting character. Like, even though he was kind of playing sides, he even congratulated Zhao on his admiral promotion, but here he does not trust Azula for a second. He's constantly giving her the side eye and the stink eye, and just something ain't right here. So it's kind of funny in that regard. But on top of that, we see that Azula is exceptionally powerful because, well, it doesn't really show in this episode, but she's able to create blue fire, which is a lot more tight, precise, and if you know anything about fire physics, it's a lot hotter. So it just shows how much better control over fire she has. But not only that, we discover that lightning is actually kind of a form of firebending. And admittedly, that doesn't make a ton of sense when you think about it, but yeah, she's able to create and manipulate lightning, which lightning manipulation in fiction is really nothing new. It's been around in constant mythologies, Return of the Jedi, or, classical mythology, Mortal Kombat, for crying out loud. But anytime it shows up, it's usually very cool and a very good way to show that a character has extreme power over their craft. So not only can Azula create lightning, but we see in a fight scene, Iroh can, in a way, redirect lightning, because Azula's about to attack Zuko. He grabs her hand and then shoots the lightning himself away from the scene where they're at. So yeah, Azula is really not someone to be trifled with. She's a great villain character, and she's the main villain of season 2, so that makes it even better. She's voiced by the great Alile, which I did have the privilege of meeting once at a convention, and I gotta say, she is just fantastic. She's great to talk to. She's really energetic. But as an actress, she's a voice actress, and she's been in, I can't even describe how many cartoons. Not surprisingly, she usually plays the villain or kind of the bratty character. She's best known probably as Vicky from Fairly Odd Parents, or Mandy from The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. But my personal favorite, if only for just how stupid it was she played the younger sister in Rhapsody Street Kids Believe in Santa. If you want a deep dive on the ancient internet, look that up. You're in for something special. So, yeah, this was a really good start to season 2, not only for kind of furthering the lore of the Avatar, but also setting up the subplot with Zuko and introducing a new set of characters that's going to carry the plot forward. I really like this episode. I think this was a good start, and it's only the beginning, so we're just going to go upwards from here. And with that said, I'll see you in the next one, and onwards and upwards, my friends.
think we're all set.
Anyone who harbors these traitors will face the wrath of the Fire Lord. There will be no place left to hide.
I think we're safe here.